Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of To The Point podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. Did a podcast with Matt Wright last night talking about some March Madness, but more than that, there's a lot going on in the world of sports. The NBA trade deadlines today, some news in the NFL regarding Deshaun Watson and some legal action that could be taken against him. What will happen with him regarding a trade? We're also seeing a week in the NHL where a referee was fired for some comments he made on the ice, which I'll get into. Great play from the Winnipeg Jets, and really the standings are starting to get clogged up in every division. We're gonna have some tight races down the stretch. We've also seen some COVID issues start to hit the North Division, so we're gonna get into all of that today. But I'm gonna start off with the NBA, and trade deadline in any sport, it's a lot of fun, and today, really the marquee name to watch is Kyle Lowry of the Toronto Raptors. The point guard, a lot of people would say Kyle Lowry is the greatest Raptor of all time. I think if you're a fan, sure. For me personally, the player that brought you a championship and did the most to do it is the greatest player in franchise history, whether he's there for 5 minutes or he's there for 15 years. For me, that would be Kawhi Leonard. But, fans love Kyle. He's been there forever. He's top 5 in points, top 5 in assists. He'll have his jersey retired when his career's over. But the Raptors, they've had a tough year. Obviously, they've had to move down to Tampa Bay because of COVID, not being able to play in Canada. Then they actually had a COVID issue where Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Malachi Flynn, OG Anunoby, and a slew of others actually had COVID. So that happened. And then until last night, they were in the midst of a 9-game losing streak where they had 2 losses to Detroit Pistons, who are bottom 5 in the NBA. They lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers. They lost to the Houston Rockets on Monday, who had lost 20 in a row prior to that win. So it's been an ugly season for the Raptors. And, Lowry's 36 years old. He's on an expiring contract, and it's time to move him because this team is not going to make the playoffs more than likely. If they do, they'll be battling for the 8th. This year it's different in the NBA because the top 10 teams, 7 through 10, will be in a play-in tournament to see who gets in. But even then, if the Raptors do make the playoffs and they play Brooklyn or Philadelphia in the first round, I don't like their chances of even coming close to winning that series. So it's a lost season for them. And they have 2, Lowry and Norman Powell, a guy was a bench guy, sometimes a starter, has had a really strong season. When people were out with injury, he took advantage, and he could get close to $20 million in the open market, which I'm not sure the Raptors are willing to pay at this time. So today, Lowry's the big name to watch, and the 2 teams really that are circling him are the Philadelphia 76ers. For obvious reasons, Philly, Kyle grew up in Philly. I think he would love to return there. He also played his college ball at Villanova. So he has a lot of ties in Philadelphia. And Norman Powell, I'll get to that in a minute. But Lowry, Philadelphia, Miami, possibly the Clippers if they could do a 3-way trade, but it's going to be very tough for them to pull that off. They have limited draft picks after trading for Paul George, and they don't have a whole lot of prospects that would interest the Toronto Raptors. But when I look at trading Lowry, I think you got to do it today. Like I said, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, and I wouldn't want to bring back a 37-year-old point guard long term. You're going to at least have to sign him to a 2-year extension, in my opinion. He's not going to take a 1-year deal to come back to Toronto. He'll want a little bit of security, and he's still playing, at a reasonably high level. But I think for the Raptors franchise, it's time to move in a different direction. Hanging on to veterans that you love is often a mistake, and I think teams fall for it too often. And I don't think Masai Ujiri, who's a great general manager, a really good president of basketball ops, will fall into that trap that other executives do. But when I look at Miami, they probably have the better trade. They could give Toronto Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero was great. If you remember the bubble last year, he's a small guard, got a great 3-point shot. He's a second-year player, and he's got a lot of game. They could also trade Duncan Robinson. He's got less of his ceiling is kind of met right now. He's a 3-point shooter, not a great defender, and he wouldn't be the one for me from Miami. But Miami is reluctant to give up, picks. They've also traded away picks, getting Jimmy Butler and doing a few things. So they're limited picks. Philly has their first round pick this year, and they do have some young prospects in Maxey, emerging center. And then they also have Matthias Thybulle, who's going to be a small forward. He's getting limited minutes right now. He does have a good outside shot, looks like a promising prospect, and they have their first round pick. So that's probably what the Raptors will get. A prospect that's on the horizon, so to speak, not yet proven. And if you can get a first round pick in the deal, it's what you're going to get for a guy like Kyle Lowry. It's better than letting him walk out and getting nothing for him, because I don't see him returning to Toronto. And if he does, you get a first round pick and an asset, and then he returns if you want to bring him back. But I think if you trade him to Philly, they find a way to give him an extension rather quickly after trading for him, and then he's locked up for a number of years and he's happy with that. The same with Miami. I think if they're trading Tyler Hero, they likely have an extension for Kyle on the table, and it's just a formality where he'll sign it, because you're not trading away a prospect who has a lot of promise, who's shown that he shows up in the big games, just to get a veteran for a rental and he walks out the door. If both teams do that, I'd be surprised. So, Lowry, I'm sure for Toronto fans today, it's a bittersweet day. You love Kyle. You'd love for him to return, but it's better off that he leaves the team. The team beat Denver last night handily, blew them out. But again, they got a tough stretch here of games. They got a lot of games against the Western Conference, which is, by far the tougher conference. They play Phoenix coming up. They still have to go through LA. So for Lowry, for the Raptors, it's time to kind of sever that tie and see what you can get for him. This year's a wash, and you can go into next offseason and say, okay, what can we do? What's available? Can we retool? And just point blank in the NBA, you're not going to win a championship without a superstar. If you look back through the years, I'll go start in 2011. 2011, the Dallas Mavericks beat the Miami Heat. It was a huge upset because the Heat had LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. But Dallas had Dirk Nowitzki, my guy. And he was a superstar. He's one of the all-time great players. Then the next couple of years, you had the Heat win with LeBron, D Wade. The Spurs winning in 14, where you had Tim Duncan, Tony Parker. I mean, then the list there speaks for itself. As you go through the years, you have LeBron winning championships. You have Kevin Durant winning championships, Steph Curry. If you do not have a superstar player in the NBA, you're not going to win. In the NHL and other sports, you don't need a superstar to win necessarily. Again, in the NFL, the 2000 Ravens did not have an offensive player that was a superstar. They did have Ed Reed and Ray Lewis on defense, but it's just different sports and how you match up. You need a superstar to win in the NBA, and the Raptors just, quite frankly, don't have it right now. So they need to move on while they can. Norman Powell's also a free agent, and they need to move him as well. He's done all he can in Toronto, but I would not want to pay him $20 million. He's a really inconsistent player. When he's hot. He can score 35 in a game. But then there's nights where he'll give you 8 points, 5 turnovers. I don't like that. I like consistency. If I'm a team, anybody watching a game, you want to say, okay, well, I know this guy's going to give me this night in, night out. I don't have that sense with Norman Powell. And I think you could probably get maybe a late round first for him, maybe a prospect. I'd do that because, again, why let an asset walk out the door for nothing? Most executives wouldn't, but we'll see what happens. No, Lowry's a big name, but a guy who has requested a trade this week publicly has been Aaron Gordon of the Orlando Magic. Aaron Gordon, he's a really good player. He's been in Orlando for a while. They've been a playoff team the past 3 years, losing in the first round all 3 years. This year they've gotten to a bit of a tailspin. They got Nikola Vucevic, who's been an all-star for a number of years. He's a great player. Aaron Gordon's known for being kind of the dunk contest guy, but he's a much better player than that. Great rebounder, a good defender, and he actually does have a good outside shot as well. But looking at Aaron Gordon, I see that's a tough deal because depending on what the Magic want, I think they're going to want a good haul for him. And it might be better for them to wait for the offseason where more teams can get involved, where they could say right now, okay, Philly might want him. The Lakers, I see that tough for them to pull off. Maybe Miami. Again, these teams would want a point guard before they'd want an Aaron Gordon. Brooklyn can't afford him, so they can't get him. Portland, interesting team. Would they try to take a crack at him just to get better? I don't think so. Phoenix, they're pretty much set with their squad. The Bucks don't have the financial flexibility to do it. So as I'm mentioning all the contenders that could realistically win a title, the list gets smaller and smaller. The Boston Celtics are the one team I didn't mention. And Boston trading for Aaron Gordon, to me, would be out of desperation. The Boston Celtics have had a terrible season to date. And yet the Eastern Conference is so terrible because you've seen, teams that we projected to make the playoffs, like the Indiana Pacers and Toronto Raptors, be on the outside looking in right now. So Boston's in the 8th seed, losing to Memphis Monday night in overtime. If they get the playoffs, you never know with the Celtics. But, they have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart. They have a team that they shouldn't need Aaron Gordon. But if they do move Aaron Gordon, they're going to have to move a key piece. I don't know who in the deal it's going to be. To me, if I'm Orlando, I probably tell Boston I want Marcus Smart. And I think that would cancel the trade. I think he's a bench player to me, but he's really effective. You play in the last 5 minutes of every game. Really good defender. He's a smart, high basketball IQ. But for Boston, Brad Stevens, Danny Ainge and co., I doubt they want to part with Marcus Smart. They'd love to trade Kemba Walker because that contract's kind of an anchor on their franchise right now. But Orlando's not doing them a favor and taking Kemba Walker as charity. So Aaron Gordon's a big name. I think he'd be a bigger splash than Kyle Lowry. But I don't know if he'll be traded today. And I don't think they'll buy him out. I'll talk about what the NBA does with buyouts. But I doubt he'll be moved today. But if he is, I see him going to the Boston Celtics. And there's a few other names out there. Victor Oladipo with Houston makes a lot of sense. He was traded from Indiana to Houston. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. He's a good player. He hasn't been really the same player. He blew out his Achilles a few years ago. That injury is so devastating. Any sport you play, when you come back, you're not the same guy. And he's lost some of the explosivity. He's lost a little bit of his ball handling. So, he's a good player, but he's not what he used to be. And Houston's lost, 21 to the last 22. They'll trade him to somebody today. I'd be shocked if they didn't. And the last big name is Lonzo Ball. Lonzo Ball is 2016 was drafted second overall by the Los Angeles Lakers. And, Magic Johnson proclaimed that he would have his jersey retired with the Lakers. It never really worked out for him. He has never had a good shot. He shoots under 60% from the free throw line as a point guard, which is just unheard of. He's a great, great passer, really good basketball IQ, but he just doesn't always bring it night in, night out. And he was traded to New Orleans in the Anthony Davis trade to the Lakers a few years ago. And I thought you get Zion Williamson in New Orleans. That's perfect for Lonzo. He can just lob Zion the ball and get, average 10 assists a game. But they want to part with him. And the Clippers want him. I think that makes a lot of sense. They're missing a true point guard. They have Patrick Beverley. They have Reggie Jackson. But those guys are really more two guards than they are a point guard. Lonzo Ball is a floor general. He's going to bring the ball up the floor every time. He's a great passer, like I said. He can feed Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Ibaka in the post. So he would make a lot of sense. I don't know what the Pelicans want. Again, he's a former number 2 overall pick, but in the eyes of everyone, including the Pelicans, clearly, because they're trading him, he hasn't lived up to expectations. So if I'm the Clippers, I really want him because they're unlikely to get Lowry, who's another true point guard. But Lonzo, I think, will really help this team when it comes to spacing, when it comes to ball movement, and just being a factor when it comes to being efficient at bringing the ball up the floor. You want to feel comfortable with the guy bringing the ball up the floor every time. I would not feel that comfortable with Patrick Beverley, with Reggie Jackson. And then what they end up doing is give it to Kawhi Leonard every time. And, he eventually wears out and, his durability is brought into question. So you want to put less tax on Kawhi Leonard and just let Lonzo Ball do his thing. And I think he'll have return to LA, have a lot of success, and potentially get to play the Lakers in the playoffs and get some redemption for being traded, his early struggles for the Lakers. So those are the real names that I think will be traded. And then there's this thing called the buyout market. And after the trade deadline, which is today at 3:00, if players are not traded, teams buy players out. They agree to, cut their contracts in half or thirds or what have you. And players basically become free agents. And they're free to sign anywhere. For instance, Andre Drummond has not played since mid-February because the Pistons have been trying to trade him, but he's got a big the Cavs have been trying to trade him, but he's got a big contract, and teams don't want it. But Cleveland does not want to sit on that contract the rest of the year. So what they'll do after 3 p.m. today is buy him out. And then Drummond can sign literally anywhere in the NBA for the veterans minimum, meaning any team can pick up his contract and he'll be good to go. So when I look at a guy like Andre Drummond, LaMarcus Aldridge, he could be traded today from the Spurs. He's requested a trade. I'm not sure. He's a guy with another big cap hit for an injury-prone player, not what he used to be. I suspect he'll be bought out. For Drummond, I see a couple destinations. The Lakers would love to have him. The Lakers, right now, they got Marc Gasol as their starting center. He's injured right now, but Marc Gasol's a little long in the tooth. He's not what he used to be. Drummond, he's never going to be a guy that's going to shoot, 20 feet from the basket, but he's the best rebounder in the NBA over the past 3 years. Really aggressive on the boards. He takes care of that side of the ball. He can block shots. Better defender than Gasol. He'd be an upgrade for sure. If they couldn't get Drummond, I think Aldridge is a guy the Lakers would want as well. But Drummond would be the big ticket because he's a true center. LaMarcus Aldridge is more of a power forward that can play center. But Drummond, if he's bought out, I would be really surprised if he did not go to the Lakers. He could potentially go to Brooklyn, which would be interesting. They've already added Blake Griffin in the buyout market, but he's more of a power forward. They do have DeAndre Jordan, but Drummond would be a better starting center and put Jordan off the bench, in my opinion. So those are the two big teams that would be looking at him. Maybe the Clippers, but again, unlikely. And then there's, a guy in New Orleans like JJ Redick. This guy's been in the league for over 15 years. He's made the playoffs 14 out of his 15 seasons. He's a small guy, not a great defender, really a liability on defense, but he's got one of the best three-point shooters in NBA history. I don't know why teams are probably not trading for him because they know New Orleans will likely buy him out anyway, so they'll have a free crack at him. When I look around, I think Philly, he's played in Philly before. I could see them trying to swoop him up, say, come back, we can use you here. Again, potentially the Heat. If I look out west, I think Denver would be an interesting spot for him. Denver's a team going to get blown out by the Raptors last night. They've kind of had an up and down season, but if they make the playoffs again, they beat the Clippers last year. They made the conference finals last season. So they do have playoff pedigree, and, Redick being a playoff performer would be an interesting fit there. And, the Clippers for Redick would be interesting too, just because I think their roster, they could put him coming off the bench. He could be a real threat to score and help their bench that's been a little mediocre so far this year. There's also guys like JaVale McGee, Austin Rivers, but that's really what today is going to be. What happens with trades, and then which players are bought out and where do they go? And in a few days, we'll know teams' rosters basically heading into the playoffs. I mean, right now the Lakers are in a lot of trouble because LeBron James is out with a high ankle sprain. You got Anthony Davis is out for an undetermined amount of time. He's been out for a while already. They're saying it's going to be at least another 3 weeks. LeBron's out 3 to 4 weeks. So how's this team going to survive? They got Philly tonight at home. They got a tough stretch, and with a tough Western Conference, we could see the Lakers slide into the 6 to 8 seed in the West. That would not surprise me one bit without their two best players. So it's an interesting scene right now in the NBA. It's really the have and have nots. We've seen surprise teams like the Knicks and the Charlotte Hornets. Those are great regular season stories. They're unlikely to make a splash in the postseason. We don't see a lot of upsets in the NBA when it comes to early rounds. The best teams, like I said, the best teams, the superstars, win 9 times out of 10. So we'll see what happens, but that's what's likely going to happen today with the NBA. A couple trades, a lot of buyout action where teams are just trying to get rid of contracts, especially teams that are losing. They don't want to keep contracts that are costing them money when they know they're going to miss the playoffs, and that player is not doing them any good just being on the roster. So that's going to happen today, and it's always fun to watch. With the trade deadline for the NHL's on April 12th, we just went through the free agency with the NFL. Player movement's always fun to watch, always interesting, and I suspect that the NBA will be no different today. Pivoting to the NFL, a story the past, really, it's been 2 weeks, but a story for the longest time has been Deshaun Watson and his desire to leave Houston. He signed a contract extension last summer. He said he loved the organization, really thanked them for everything that they did for him. Then things started to happen. They traded DeAndre Hopkins, his number one receiver, which he took on the chin. He didn't complain about it. Good on him. And then it was reported that the team wanted to include Deshaun Watson in their hiring of their head coach and general manager. And they ended up hiring another New England disciple to come in to be the general manager after Deshaun Watson reportedly wanted Eric Bieniemy as his head coach and wanted another black minority candidate as his general manager. They hired David Culley in the last minute as their head coach. He's never been a head coach in the league. But prior to hiring David Culley, Deshaun Watson, through his agent, said, I would like to be traded from the Houston Texans. Houston's remained steadfast in that they're not going to trade him. They have no interest in trading him. Deshaun Watson's their quarterback of the future. But, Deshaun has not talked to the organization in months, and, he looks like he'd be willing to sit out the season. That was fine. Till last week, where we saw a sad state of affairs where women started coming out and alleging sexual assault and sexual misconduct, inappropriate behavior on behalf of Deshaun Watson. To date, there are 16 allegations against him. Like I said, sexual assault. A lot of these are due to when he's going to get massages. He's really inappropriate with the masseuse, making them feel uncomfortable against sexual assault. And he's denied these claims. He said he'll take them all to court. And I'm not going to comment on whether I think he did it or not, because I don't, quite frankly, that's not my job here. I'm not a judge. I'm not a jury. And, right now, not for 90% of people, Deshaun Watson is guilty because in today's world, you are guilty until proven innocent, where it should be the latter, innocent until proven guilty. But what I'm more interested in is the football side of it. Of course, if this is true, then he should be done. I mean, that it can't happen in today's world. The sexual assault, the inappropriate behavior towards women, that's not acceptable. I think it's so tough because we've seen in the past where women make up stories and it's settled outside of court. And then you're like, well, what really happened here? Deshaun said he will go to court with these women. 16 have come forward. The sheer number makes you really think, okay, 16 women. 16 women saying the same thing. It sure makes you think, well, Deshaun, what was going on? And if it's 16 and it's reported that there are 22 women that will come forward, this is a pattern of bad behavior. And, they're saying, these women are saying all these infractions happened in the past year. So I don't know, but as the numbers rise, it makes me really start to question Deshaun Watson, of course. But like I said, until they're done in court, it's hard to put judgment on anybody because you don't know. So I'm going to wait until I see the facts if they go to court. But what will happen with Deshaun Watson, obviously he wants a trade. Houston does not want to trade him. Maybe they want to trade him a little bit more now because the PR, if this is true, and it's, right now a lot of them are civil cases. If it gets to criminal, that's when we get into serious stuff because Deshaun Watson could go to jail. His career is over. But what does this mean for trade ramifications? He wants out of Houston. Houston said they don't want to trade him. I still think they probably don't want to trade him. You have Deshaun Watson. They're probably doing their dirty work, trying to figure out a lot of these cases, what it means for them and for him. But they got teams that are still interested, of course, because this is the truth about sports. Say a lot of these civil cases are accurate and Deshaun Watson, has to pay fines or whatever it is. He can still be suspended by the NFL, which he likely will in that case. You can fine a player up to 6 games. That's the bare minimum, 6 games. It can be reduced or it could be more depending on the situation. So we'll see what happens there. But even if Deshaun Watson is handed a 6-game suspension to start the 2021-2022 season, teams will still take him because he's under contract another 5 years. You're going to get Deshaun Watson for 4.5 years. The guy's one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, this is capitalism at its finest. You have a damaged good, and a team can say, well, yeah, we'll take the PR hit. Well, he's going to get suspended. He's going to be on our roster. Yeah, that's going to look bad for us. But when that 6-game suspension's over, people are going to forget about the civil lawsuits, and they're going to remember Deshaun Watson putting our jersey on, wearing number 4, and being our quarterback. And it sounds perverse. It sounds wrong. I agree. But that's just how pro sports work. You see teams do it all the time. Players went through it with Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas lately. You think of the Ray Rice situation. Baltimore kept him on the roster far too long when it seemed really plainly obvious that Ray Rice was doing bad things. Adrian Peterson, that whole situation. He was on Minnesota's roster until after it. That one was really messed up to me because I don't think he did anything particularly wrong. But again, these situations happen. And what will likely happen to Deshaun Watson, he's going to be put on the commissioner's exempt list. So what that means is Houston can have no contact with Deshaun Watson, none, and he cannot have any contact with the organization he's with. He'll still be getting paid because he's not technically suspended, but there's an investigation, and so he'll collect the paycheck and just sit there. Obviously, we have a lot of time until the NFL season starts, but there are dates. There's mini camp. There's the draft. There's workouts before training camp. So there's dates that he would likely skip if he's still in Houston, and he'll be paid for if he's on the commissioner's exempt list, which would be interesting. But it changes everything because the draft is on April 29th. That's almost a month away. So what do they do with Deshaun Watson? What's the plan? Because teams are gonna, if you're Houston, you want draft picks, particularly this year. If you're going to trade him, what are teams? If it was 3 first-round picks that they're asking for, has that ask been dropped down to 2? If I'm teams, it likely is because of all the uncertainty, and you can get a bargain deal for Deshaun Watson. So there's a lot of unknowns here. We still got to go through the process, but this story is not going away. If he's traded before the draft or, by the draft, wouldn't surprise me. But then again, Houston has remained that they're not going to trade him, but they've had so much negative PR on their organization. Maybe they don't care anymore when it comes to their ownership a few years ago saying we can't let the inmates run the asylum. And I don't, yes, that I know that's employees, that's not letting employees run the business. I think he was making more of a comment on African Americans than he was about, the white quarterback in the room, so to speak. But the McNair family has never had a clean record. So maybe they won't care about those negative PR. If it was a team like, the Pittsburgh Steelers took the Ben Roethlisberger situation seriously, they have a pretty good reputation when it comes to situations like this. They have a really clean history. So I'll keep you guys posted on this story. It's not going away. And I just hope that the women and Deshaun both have their day in court and the truth shall ultimately set you free. If Deshaun did these things, then he needs to pay the piper. He needs to be suspended. And if it's a criminal case, he needs to go to jail because that's just not tolerated in today's world. It shouldn't have been tolerated anytime. But as we get into the Me Too movement, as we get into different things, sexual assault's a serious thing and it needs to be taken that way. So again, I don't look at Deshaun as a guilty person. I don't look at these women as, crying wolf, so to speak, because quite frankly, I don't know enough about it. I just need to sit here, tell you guys what comes up on my news, on my timeline, and I'll, react accordingly. Other NFL news, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they've had a busy offseason. They re-signed they reworked Tom Brady's contract. They re-signed Rob Gronkowski, re-signed Shaq Barrett, re-signed Donovan Smith, re-signed Levante David. And yesterday they added to their signings, re-signing Ndamukong Suh from their Super Bowl winning roster, signing him to a 1-year, $9 million deal. And what this did is really illuminated. As of right now, they have 21 of their 22 starters from the Super Bowl roster last year returning to their team. Basically, the band is back together. The only player that has not been re-signed yet, he's still a free agent, is Leonard Fournette. Again, you bring back all these great players that helped you win a title. Doesn't matter. It's offense, special teams that re-signed their kicker, Ryan Suckup. They're bringing the band literally back together. Tom Brady has faith in this team, and it sure looks like they're going to have they got to be them and the Chiefs. I said it after the Super Bowl, the day after the Super Bowl. Them and the Chiefs will be the two favorites to win the Super Bowl right now. I looked at the odds this morning. Sure enough, they are. And I like the approach from Jason Light, from, GM Tom Brady, in bringing back everybody that won last year, because you're going to have that same hunger. You're still in Tampa Bay. You have a division that's in flux because Drew Brees retiring. Jameis Winston likely the starter in New Orleans, but he's had a mixed career. Carolina, will they draft a quarterback? What's going to happen there with Matt Rule? And then in Atlanta, it looks like Matt Ryan's going to return. They went 4-12 last year. It's been ugly since losing the Super Bowl to Tom Brady. So it seems like, Tom Brady's had a hex on that franchise since the 28-3 meltdown from the Falcons. But I just credit the Bucs for bringing back the players that won them the championship. And does that mean they're going to win the championship again next year? No. But the one big splash signing they made was Shaq Barrett. We see teams like New England really spend money. And it does work occasionally where teams that win free agency, quote unquote, win March, win in February. But it's not that often. It's small signings. It's, the likes of Ndamukong Suh. It's a signing a right guard that you see just fall off the market. Forever, New England waited until the big names were out the free agent market, and Bill Belichick would swoop in and get deals for players. And he won Super Bowls. And you could say that was a lot to do with Tom Brady, But I mean, Bill Belichick's the greatest coach in the history of the league, so he deserves a lot of credit for that too. But I like the Bucs philosophy where they're keeping their own in-house. They're bringing back the band. They got the same coach. They got the GM. They got the quarterback. And ultimately, it's showing Tom Brady, you came to Tampa Bay. We're going to give you every opportunity to win as many Super Bowls as you can before you retire. He may never retire. He might just keep playing. But for him, he's got to be excited to have these guys back together. Fournette's still a free agent. Would not shock me if Fournette is in the Tampa Bay uniform by day one of camp. There's rumors that New England would like to get him, which is funny that Bill Belichick would take him away from Tom Brady. But if I'm Fournette, I look around. If the money's not that great anywhere, and I can go back to a team where I had the most success in my career. He started his career in Jacksonville, was cut as a 4th overall pick from LSU. I can go back, split carries with Ronald Jones, and win a Super Bowl. Let's do that. Let's do that with Brady. It's my best chance rather than going to a mediocre team for a little bit better money. Other news, T.Y. Hilton, receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. He's returning to the Colts on a 1-year, $10 million deal. He's kind of a big play guy, can catch the 80-yard touchdown. He's had injury problems the last few years, but interesting to see what he can do with Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz does have a big arm when he's accurate. We saw him throw the ball to Deshaun Jackson for years in Philadelphia. So another weapon. You got the kid Perriman. You got T.Y. Hilton. You got good tight ends and Jack Doyle. So Carson Wentz with Jonathan Taylor and N'Keal Hines at running back. So Carson Wentz does have a good complement of weapons when the season starts. And for him, it's a rebirth, it's a new start. And T.Y. Hilton's going to go back, have another quarterback. He's had plenty over his career with Jacoby Brissett, Brian Hoyer, Phillip Rivers, Andrew Luck, Scott Tolzien. So I'm sure he's hoping he signed a 1-year deal. I'm sure he's hoping he can kind of find some more success, re-sign with the Colts for bigger money, and just have a stable quarterback, week in, week out, which has not been the case for T.Y. in Indianapolis. And then a couple of backup quarterback signings, which, is not overly interesting, but one is the Jacksonville Jaguars signed CJ Beathard. He's been in San Francisco for 6 years as a 2nd/3rd string quarterback. Jacksonville has the number 1 overall pick, so they're likely going to select Trevor Lawrence out of Clemson. And what this means to me is we're likely going to see Gardner Minshew, who is the mustache guy. He had a lot of hype in Jacksonville at the beginning of the year. He'll likely be traded. I don't think he's a starting quarterback, but he'd be one of the lead backups. I think a team would really enjoy having him on the roster. Got a good personality. It would add something to a team. But with Beathard going to Jacksonville, you could see Gardner Minshew on the move in the coming months to a team. Maybe Detroit would be a name to watch for me. Backup Jared Goff there. They let Chase Daniel go. So maybe Gardner Minshew with a rookie contract wouldn't be a bad ad for Detroit. Or for a team looking for a backup quarterback, potentially New England, if they don't draft a quarterback in this year's draft. And then the Eagles. The Eagles, we look at the NFC East where the Giants have really gotten better. They got Daniel Jones at quarterback who still needs to prove something. They signed Kenny Golladay. They got Saquon Barkley coming back from injury. They got Darius Slayton. They got Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram at tight end. Really strong defensive line. And, they look like a good team. The Cowboys have been quiet in free agency. They do have, their elite offense, their quarterback back. And then, Washington, they got Fitzpatrick. They got Curtis Samuel. They got a strong defense. Antonio Gibson is a really strong running back for them. So they look like a good team. The Eagles have been quiet in free agency. And, their quarterback position is in flux. They traded Carson Wentz. They do have, last year's 2nd-round pick, Jalen Hurts, slated as the starting quarterback. They have the 6th pick in the draft. Will they select a quarterback? They say they're not going to, but who knows? But yesterday they signed, Joe Flacco, 37-year-old Joe Flacco as their backup quarterback. He was with the Jets last year. Started 4 games, obviously lost them all. And he actually got a raise from Philly to come play for them after leaving the Jets, which is surprising. I thought that would be the last stop for Joe. He had a great run in Baltimore, won a Super Bowl, really great playoff quarterback. His regular seasons have been a little bit of a mixed bag, but the Eagles, I don't know what they're going to do. You got Jalen Hurts. If he flames out, you have Joe Flacco behind him. Gardner Minshew would have been to trade for Gardner Minshew would have been better for me than Joe Flacco. I mean, maybe it's telling Jalen Hurts you have no threat because Joe Flacco is so past his prime. But if I'm Jalen Hurts, I'm still worried with the scenario with Joe Flacco sitting there because he somehow just finds a way to start games in this league. He started some of the Jets last year where Sam Darnold was a healthy scratch one game. So the Eagles quarterback situation is still a misnomer for me. I don't know what it means for them. I wouldn't be shocked if I see them draft a quarterback because Jalen Hurts did not do enough to sell me. But then again, give him an honest crack, give him a training camp, give him time to work with receivers. And that's probably the direction I take. And then if it flames out, okay, well, you have a tough year salary cap-wise anyway. You're eating a lot of dead cap money. With Carson Wentz, have Jalen Hurts go through the ringer. He'll learn. Then go draft a quarterback in next year's draft and, move forward with him. But always interesting because teams, you got Nick Sirianni, a new head coach. Teams now have less patience than ever. And Philly winning a Super Bowl a few years ago, I don't think they want to lose, that momentum that they had built. Pivoting to the NHL, you got the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg came into the week behind Toronto and Edmonton by 4 points. Start the week tied with Toronto and Edmonton. And, they're playing some good. They had a stumble last week, losing to Edmonton twice, which is going to happen. They're playing some really good hockey. But they play Vancouver twice this week. They get 2 really sound wins. 4-0 on Monday, 5-1 last night. Connor Hellebuck really starting to find his game. And what Winnipeg has is a third line that can play with any third line in hockey. And they could honestly match up with the team's top line because they've done it before. You look at the third line of Winnipeg, if Andrew Copp, Adam Lowry, and Mason Appleton is dominant. It wouldn't surprise me if I see Andrew Copp. If Andrew Copp, he comes to mind because he had a 4-goal game last night against the Canucks. He could move up into a higher role for this team, playing with the Scheifele, playing with Wheeler potentially. I wouldn't do it because I love that third line so much, and they have a strong top 6 with Connor and Ehlers up there and Dubois and Stastny. So I'd keep this third line together, but it can play against anybody. If I'm Winnipeg and I play Toronto in the playoffs, Copp, Appleton, and Lowry is either going to play against Matthews or Tavares line. I'd pick the Matthews one because stopping that Tavares line right now is not that hard. It basically get anybody on the ice and they're not scoring goals. So that's not a tough ask. But I look at Lowry, Copp, and Appleton, and you say, okay, you guys go out there against Matthews' line, handle your business. You should be fine. And I wouldn't be scared of that matchup, especially with Hellebuck playing this way. I said from the beginning of the season, I think Winnipeg's the best team in the North Division. I predicted them to win this division. I don't think they will, quite frankly. I think Toronto will. Toronto has a game in hand on them. They're tied in points with 42. But to me, it doesn't – home ice, what does home ice matter? There's no fans. So, the big difference I still think is Toronto – the trade deadline's on April 12th, so both teams still have time to add. Winnipeg needs to add to their defense to be an elite team. Will Columbus part with David Savard? I think that's up in the air now. If not, if I'm them, I try to get Matthias Ekholm from Nashville. Ekholm's a stable guy. He's going to add to that team and be really productive. So I want Ekholm on my team. Looking elsewhere, I mentioned Troy Stetcher from Detroit. Again, he's kind of a mixed bag player. And then, there's other teams to look at. potentially a Nick Jalmerson in Arizona. Alex Goligoski's on the market. So, there are players out there that would be good ads for a team like the Winnipeg Jets. Savard would be the big fish for me, but they're 2 points behind Chicago in the Central. I don't know if they're going to trade him if they think they're going to make the playoffs. It's a tough decision for them. If you get that 4 spot, you're going to play Tampa Bay. I wouldn't want to. Again, I think long and hard about parting with David Savard because he's likely going to leave for nothing. Nick Foligno's a different thought because he's the captain. He's got roots in Columbus. I think he loves it there. Savard's going to want big money, and I don't think Columbus is going to give it to him. So I think about trading him because I think you're going to get a good piece for him, at least probably a first rounder plus for David Savard. And so if I'm Winnipeg, I do my best to get him. So that's what they need. Toronto can still improve. I just think, when you look at their third line, the Engvall, Mikheyev, Hyman experiment is working well. But with their team constructed the way it is, I know Alex Galchenyuk is Daryl Sittler. But on the left side with Thornton, Galchenyuk, and you have Hyman on the third line, if you think you're going to win a cup with that, well, you're probably like Toronto Maple Leafs of, probably every year in the last 50, and you'd be wrong. So I think they need to upgrade their left side in a major way. Foligno would be a guy that would help the Maple Leafs a lot. I look at a guy like Rickard Rakell in Anaheim. He's a underrated player. He plays for a really bad team, so he doesn't get a lot of notoriety, but he would be a great ad. I think both teams Winnipeg and Toronto are both better than Edmonton. Edmonton obviously has Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, 2 of the, you could say, top 3 best players in the game right now. But the rest of their roster, I have less faith in. I like Toronto's, obviously Matthews and Marner on the top line, and Hyman. Love it. If Tavares is playing like he normally can, and Nylander, that's better than anything Edmonton has to offer on their second line. Nugent Hopkins is a good player. Yamamoto is a good player. Puljujarvi is a good player. Tavares and Nylander have potential of being star players, not superstar, because that's a different tier, but they're better. And then you look at, I like Mikheyev. I like Mikheyev. I like Engvall more than I like Alex Chiasson and James Neal. So just going down the line, I just like the team better. Even in goaltending, I give Toronto a slight edge over Edmonton. So I think Winnipeg is really starting to show what they're made of. Their whole team is just really well built. They need to improve their defense. They've had to overhaul their defense the past couple of years just through cap and bad luck with Dustin Byfuglien and Jacob Trouba demanding a trade. So we'll see what happens with Winnipeg when it comes to the trade deadline. But heading into this week, they play Vancouver twice. They get 2 wins decisively. They play Calgary over the weekend. So they need to capitalize here, stay with Toronto, stay with Edmonton in the race, because obviously getting first would be a huge advantage because you're likely going to play Montreal or Calgary in that opening round of the playoffs. Another big story this week, and this one is a quiet one, but in Ottawa, we see a plateau of goaltenders go down. Matt Murray's injured. Joey Daccord injured. Marcus Hogberg injured. And they're basically forced to start Philip Gustafson. And Philip Gustafson was acquired in a trade a few years ago, and he was really a big name acquired in a deal with Pittsburgh. And at the time, I said, well, this guy could be a huge part of the future, but you see them sign Matt Murray. Hogberg kind of jumped over him. Joey Daccord even got a call up before Gustafson. But he's made 2 starts this week, his first 2 NHL starts, and he's allowed 2 goals in 2 games. The guy's been really, really solid for Ottawa. Ottawa beats Calgary twice this week, both at home, where they played really well this year. But, you got Matt Murray signed long-term, but Gustafson was a guy acquired in a trade that I looked at and said, that makes a lot of sense. He's just a really solid player, and he was young. He was 19 at the time. I still think this guy, I watched him play last night. It was an early start last night to the Ottawa Calgary game. This guy can play. And They got Matt Murray signed long-term, like I said, but Gustafson, great start to his career. Ottawa's got, Thomas Chabot's playing a ton. He's averaging 32 minutes a game the last 10 games or so, playing a ton of minutes. They're playing Alex Formanton now. They called him up. Drake Batherson's having a great year. Rookie Tim Stützle is incredibly fun to watch. So they have a lot to be excited about in Ottawa. And, Philip Gustafson's a guy I don't think you can quit on yet. For me, it's going to be a dogfight in training camp next year. Matt Murray will obviously be the starter. Hogberg, to me, does not look like a backup goaltender. Prior to his injury, he shouldn't have been in the NHL. So he's a wash. I think it'll be Decor, Gustafson right now, unless they add a veteran. But, Gustafson's a guy where he's going to have some runway here because Matt Murray's out for weeks. Decor's out for the season. Hogberg's unknown. But if I'm Ottawa, I'm giving Gustafson the rope here to play some games. They're playing Toronto tonight. I don't know if he'll play a back-to-back, but I wouldn't be hesitant to do it. He's a young goaltender. See what he can do. You're going to play against Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, against some really elite players. Let's see what you can bring to the table on a back-to-back for the first time in your NHL career. But he's got a couple weeks here to show what he can do at the NHL level. Give Pierre Dorian, give the Ottawa Brass something to think about when it comes to their long-term plans and goal. Because if he can take the net and really show them something, it would make Matt Murray not expendable, but I think it would make Gustafson maybe a 1B, potentially a backup goaltender heading into the 2022 season. So an opportunity for him, great start to his career, and credit to the Ottawa Senators beating Calgary twice this week. Really tough losses for Calgary because they need these points. Looking at the North Division standings, you got Toronto, Winnipeg, and Edmonton all tied at 42 points. Then you have Montreal. Montreal won't be able to play games until at least Monday because they've had players enter the COVID protocol list. Their season's suspended right now until Monday, so they can't play. You have Vancouver's behind them. They've already played 37 games, so they only got 19 left. They played the most games in the NHL, so they're kind of in a weird position where do they have enough time to get wins here? They need to win basically every time they hit the ice. And then you got Montreal, Calgary. Again, Calgary needs to find some wins. They got Winnipeg twice this weekend. You need to at least get one of those wins because Montreal's not playing, and this is the time to make up ground because Montreal's going to have games in hand. It's going to be a lot of games down the stretch, but you don't want to be put in a position where you're relying on Montreal to fail when you should be handling your own business, so to speak. Some other story, Buffalo loses their 15th straight last night. That's just kind of a broken record right now. I don't know when that streak's going to end because any game Buffalo goes into, you can't say that you can't feel confident they're going to win. I mean, they lost to New Jersey. They've lost to some really bad teams. So, but Buffalo's just a walking gong show right now. I think they might play tomorrow night. They play Saturday against the Boston Bruins. So that's a game for them, but they're not a fun team to watch. They're kind of I feel bad they play tonight actually against Pittsburgh again. So good luck there. Pittsburgh and Boston, their next two. But for teams like Pittsburgh, teams like Boston that are fighting for their playoff lives, you need to beat the Sabres. The Sabres are a must. Every time you play them, you get 2 points, you stay healthy, you get out of that rink. So we'll see what happens there. Boston will return to the ice tonight. They were out since last Thursday. They played the last game against Buffalo due to COVID protocol. So they'll be back tonight playing the Islanders, and then they have the Sabres on Saturday. So I'll keep an eye on that as well. But like I said, it's tight, the races in the NHL. I mentioned the North. You got the Islanders 2 points up on Washington, but Washington has 2 games in hand with 46 and 44 points. You got Pittsburgh with 42. Then you have Boston trailing Pittsburgh, but they have many games in hand. And the Rangers and Philly, who continue to struggle, trailing them. Then in the Central, you got Tampa Bay, 50 points. Carolina, 45. Florida, 44. Chicago, 35. Columbus, 33. So really a dogfight at the bottom. And then Carolina and Florida jostling for position for home ice in the first round of the playoffs. Then in the West, you have Vegas with 45. Colorado, who had won 7 straight prior to Tuesday night, but Nathan McKinnon has found his game. He's on a tear with 12 points in his last 5 games. You got Minnesota with 41, and then St. Louis 37, LA 33, still somewhat in the race. So still lots to be decided. It could just come down to home ice. Can Minnesota hold off St. Louis? I mean, that would be a big St. Louis playing Vegas in the first round is a tough matchup. I thought before the season it'd be Minnesota, Vegas, or potentially even Arizona. That Arizona would be a better team, put up a better fight. But as it looks right now, it's going to be St. Louis needs to catch Minnesota. They need to start playing some better hockey if they don't want to have Vegas in that first round, which I'd rather play Colorado. I mentioned Major League Baseball. It starts a week today, opening day, April 1st. And this weekend, I'm going to be recording a podcast on, kind of MLB preview show, look at a lot of the divisions, where free agents landed, the elite teams going into the season, and the whole shooting match when it comes to Major League Baseball this season. But for Canada's team, the Blue Jays, they're going to be playing in Dunedin to start the year. But they've had a pretty strong spring when it comes to swinging the bat. They're winning a lot of games. Again, what does that mean? Really nothing, because what you do in spring training does not mean you're going to have a great season. Maybe the Blue Jays do, but I don't think they're going to be a terrible team. But I don't think they're going to be a team that's a dominant team in this league. But one big bad thing about spring training for the Blue Jays has been injuries. We saw Nate Pearson go down last week. We saw Thomas Hatch have to leave a game, and he's going to be out for a period of time. And more injuries. Kirby Yates, he's a really fantastic reliever, was a former closer with the San Diego Padres, was an elite closer for a long time. It was revealed on Tuesday that he's going to have Tommy John surgery for the second time in his career. He's out the entire season. This really hurts their bullpen because he was going to be the anchor at the end of it, where you got a lead, you get to the end of the game, you give the ball to Kirby Yates, you feel comfortable. So that's a huge loss. Again, they're going to have to fill that with maybe Jordan Romano get that opportunity. But last year they kind of didn't have a closer. They kind of rotated between guys. You like to have a guy. They wanted to be Ken Giles last year. He was out with Tommy John. So not having a designated closer really, really hurts your team, because you're throwing guys into different situations on any given day where you want to have a closer that, okay, this is my guy. We got a two-run lead in the ninth. I'm giving him the ball. We're walking away with the win. So major loss there. Then we also hear George Springer, Kevin Biggio, Robbie Ray. They're all injured. Springer's supposed to be ready by opening day, but that's not 100% guarantee yet. Robbie Ray, again, he may miss his first couple starts. So with Pearson, Hatch out, Robbie Ray, Kirby Yates, this team did not have great pitching to begin with. But you look at the rotation they got Hyun-Jin Ryu. He's a great starter. He's their number one, but he's more of a number 2 starter than he is a number 1, because he can only really throw 6 innings and then he's done. He throws 6 innings. He looks at Charlie Montoya and says, "I'm done. See ya. Check please." So then you got guys like, they just don't have a great rotation. I don't with Robbie Ray and Ross Stripling and Tanner Roark. They have a lot of journeyman guys that they're hoping pitch well. And, Steven Matz, who really had a tough year last year with the Mets, hoping that guys play well is really a dangerous precedent, because you're hoping a guy turns it around. Well, Roark has been pretty terrible for a number of years. So you're hoping he reverts back to what? A 4.30 ERA? You got Robbie Ray, who's a lefty, and that's the main reason they brought him back, to have a lefty starter. You're hoping that what's Robbie Ray's ceiling? What's your hope for him to not just get mashed around all over the yard? So I look at this team. I think it's got a lot of flaws. Hitting wise, I think they're great. You got Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who they got playing third a little bit. That's nice that they put him there. He's playing well in spring. Springer, when he's healthy, Randall Grichuk and Wright, who great defensively. His bat is either great or terrible. Then you got Lourdes Gurriel, Teoscar Hernandez in left. Biggio can play all over the diamond, and then you got, rotating guys behind the plate with Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk. But the pitching on this team, I think a lot of fans expect the Blue Jays to be a really good team. The Rays have gotten worse on paper. The Red Sox are not a very good team. The Orioles are still terrible. The Yankees pitching is not great either. So I think a lot of fans expect this team to be really highly competitive, have a great season. With their pitching the way it is right now, I can't look at this team and say it's going to be an elite team. I think it's going to be trouble to make the playoffs with this pitching lineup. To have Tanner Roark every fifth day is scary to me. And Nate Pearson's not going to be starting this year. The guy can't pitch more than 12 innings before he has another injury. He looks like another Aaron Sanchez right now, where just when you think he's found it, he's injured again. And that is my big worry for him. Obviously, you love his arm. He can throw close to 100, but whenever he starts to feel it, he's out again with injury. So the season's a week away. Like I said, I'm going to talk more about this weekend, recording a preview show. We'll talk about all the teams around Major League Baseball, some of the teams that were buyers, sellers, and everything in between. But I'll be back tomorrow morning, recap some of the action tonight, trade deadline news from the NBA, a big slate of games in the NHL tonight after kind of a quiet week. Recap, Jack Campbell, aka Ed Belfour, getting the start for the Toronto Maple Leafs tonight against the Ottawa Senators. The Boston Bruins get back on the ice and a whole lot more. Also preview UFC 260 this weekend, where we'll see Stipe Miocic fight Francis Ngannou for the UFC World Heavyweight title. So that's it for today. Great show. Hope you guys enjoyed it. But I'll be back tomorrow. Like I said, lots more coming this weekend. But until we talk again, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk soon.